Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, hello and welcome to the Free Press Live. I'm Michael Moynihan, the host of the Free Press Live tonight and another Thursday. Joining me again, I shouldn't say I'm the host because that's wrong and that's unfair because there's two of us, just the two of us. We can make it if we try. Opinion editor for Newsweek, Batya Ungar-Sargon, returning guest, senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a contributing editor at the Free Press, Abigail Shrier. You should buy her books. They're amazing. And first-time guest, first time meeting this young lad, Free Press reporter, River Page. So tonight, we have a lot to cover. We're going to talk about tonight. First off, we'll be talking about the Teamsters refusing to endorse a 2024 candidate. I wonder why. And the assassination attempt on President Trump that you've already forgotten about, the media's already forgotten about. Israel's pretty amazing tactic of making people's pants blow up in Lebanon, the exploding pager scandal to some people, heroic act to others, including myself. And finally, I'll be walking into a whole load of trouble by maybe giving a little qualified defense of P. Diddy, Puff Daddy, whatever the hell he's called now. I don't know. But there's going to be a freak off later, Batya. But before that, your favorite people in the world, the Teamsters, didn't do what you wanted them to do. What's going on? Why didn't they endorse Trump?
I don't know, man. I like this so much better. I like this so much better. So in a major blow to the Harris campaign, the Teamsters, yes, Michael is right, my favorite people, one of America's biggest unions with a 1.3 million rank and file members, have refused to endorse a 2024 candidate for president. The union's refusal to back a Democrat in the race breaks 30 years of precedent, and it has set it apart from other major American unions, which retain close ties to the Democratic Party. So here's Teamsters boss Sean O'Brien, indeed one of my favorite people, explaining why neither candidate received their endorsement.
We cannot dictate to our members. Our members are sophisticated. They're going to make their own decisions. But this is a bigger problem. You know, the Democrats have always taken for granted that they're going to get our vote no matter what. And the Republicans fancy themselves as the working people's party. I think right now both sides have to take a step back and really reevaluate what their commitment is to working people. And that's what we did in this process.
So the refusal to endorse Harris follows on the heels of another historic move. O'Brien was granted a primetime spot at the Republican National Convention by Donald Trump, after which he was effectively banned from the DNC in retaliation. But although O'Brien refused to officially endorse a candidate, there was something of an endorsement of Donald Trump in the results of a poll that the union released of its members, which found that almost 60% of rank and file union members picked Trump as their choice for president, and only 34% backed Harris. Here's Trump responding to the news.
The vote of the Teamsters themselves was very high for me, and the leadership, Sean O'Brien and the group, who are great people, they said we can't endorse the Democrats. So I think this is the first time in many decades that they haven't endorsed Democrats.
So I want to make two quick points before opening this up for discussion. The first is, Michael, I do not agree with you that my first choice would have been that they endorsed Trump. I think Sean O'Brien is a national treasure and a total hero. He had so much pressure from the Democratic side to endorse the Democrat, along with 30 years of precedent. But there was also a lot of pressure, I think, to vote to endorse Trump, because he got that spot at the RNC and because 60% of his members are Trump supporters. And I think that his refusal to pick and effectively saying, look, I trust my members to make their own choice. What a decision. What an act of leadership at a time when we are so divided. And of course, the second point I want to make here is this is the realignment of American political life along class lines incarnate. So you have the Teamsters, 60% of them picking Trump really cleaning up with working class Americans of all races. And meanwhile, you have Kamala Harris bragging about having the endorsement of Dick Cheney, Goldman Sachs, right? Like the economists, the deep state, right? This is really the realignment that we've been talking about for so long. So, River, I want to start with you. You're from one of these working class communities that were historically Democrats and are now pretty much, Trump's red wall. What did you make of the refusal of the Teamsters to pick a side?
I mean, I think it's better than endorsing the Democrats. I mean, I have family members in union. My brother's an electrician; he's in the union. My uncle's in a construction union. And none of them are Democrats, and they haven't been for 20 years. I think could have been smarter for him to endorse Trump and maybe try to get one of his allies on the NLRB. But I mean, this is definitely better than endorsing a Democrat, because the Democratic Party is just really not delivered for unions in a way that I think is substantial. I mean, they've done a little bit under Biden. That Biden, has sort of been hailed as the greatest president or the greatest administration for unions since, I don't know, Carter or something, or maybe before Carter. But I mean, it's still very little. I mean, that really just shows like how bad things have been for unions, in my opinion. So it's better than endorsing a Democrat. But I think that he should have tried to negotiate maybe getting a Teamsters ally on the NLRB. But, you take what you can get.
Abigail, something really interesting that Sean O'Brien brought up in his Fox interview, sort of announcing this or explaining why he didn't pick a side, was he said, listen, there's a cultural component here to why working class people don't like the Democratic Party anymore. You're such a spokesperson for the sort of overreach on a lot of these cultural issues. Do you see those issues on things like gender as being a big propeller in the realignment, or do you see them as sort of adjacent to the more economic questions?
It's a good question. I mean, I love the exchange between AOC and Sean O'Brien on this, because AOC attacked Sean O'Brien for not getting in line. And he fired back and he said, in your own district, a majority of Teamsters prefer the Republicans. Now, what he's saying is, look, you're trying to tell me how to do my job. Why don't you do your job and serve your constituents? And I think a lot of these people feel left behind. And I think we saw that this week in a different way in the Senate. We had the Republicans asking repeatedly for a task force on anti-Semitism. The Democrats refusing. They made it a hate crimes task force. And then the person they put in charge, the co-chair, Maya Berry, is someone who's very hostile to Israel and doesn't believe calls for intifada are hate crimes or hate speech. So again, you have a constituency completely left behind. And, you have a lot of leaders screaming for loyalty, and they seem to forget what they're in office to do, and that's to represent the people.
Yeah, definitely. It was so amazing because Democrats kept pulling out these like local Teamsters units whose leadership had decided we're going to endorse Kamala Harris. And it's like, yeah, but we now know that 60% of your rank and file are not okay with that. Michael, do you agree that Sean O'Brien would have gotten further had he endorsed Trump? Was this a missed opportunity?
No, I actually agree with you on this one. I think it was the right decision to not endorse anyone. And I think that's the right decision for every union always. The union members, as Sean O'Brien said in his melodic Boston accent, where I'm from, I like to see people with Massachusetts accents making points because it just undermines them. I'm saying I believe him last being from Boston. But I would say that when he says like our guys are smart, they can make up their mind on their own. I mean, I understand why people oppose, say, right to work laws, and I think that's a sticking point with Trump too, who refuses to do that on a federal level and say the right to work stuff. And there's been some argument about that with unions, but my problem with unions on this front, and like River, I mean, I come from a union household. My dad was in the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I mean, I grew up in a union house. The union and my father had a contentious relationship, not for political reasons, but just because he didn't think they did a lot, and he thought they got really fat up top. And that is the problem. And right to work stuff, I usually approach that by saying that you guys are, funding all these very progressive causes. You can look down the line. There's some of these unions that have very conservative members are funding the most bananas progressive causes. So like, do you want, if you have to join a union, then you have to give money to this organization that is becoming a political entity in which you and the people around you don't agree with. One thing I just wanted to point out before I throw back to you, Batya, is that this isn't new. This has always been the case with people in unions. I mean, they've always been more conservative. I mean, we think about in the 1960s is people going out in the street to the tones of Paint It Black and protesting the Vietnam War. No one really remembers the 1970 Hard Hat riot in New York City, which was a pro-American, essentially pro-Vietnam War or pro the president, you support your country riot in Manhattan by guys in a union. This is from memory, but the AFL-CIO was an anti-communist union because there were so many unions like the Longshoremen's Union that were overtaken by communists. They were a conservative group. They just wanted, certain things for workers, but, culturally, good God, they were supporting Richard Nixon. It's not a sea change. It's just that they're starting to listen to their membership because the Republican candidate now, now since 2016, has been talking about workers and the working class, not the middle class. It was always the middle class before. Now they're talking about working class, and they have to pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because the disgust that the sort of educated elite left has for rank and file, the working class, regular people, this goes back to the 19th century. You see this in the early Marxists as well. River, as somebody whose family went through this process, right, of going from being Democrats to being more in the Trump camp, walk us through what that was like, because I think that a lot of people in sort of on the left and the Democratic Party, they really still just don't understand this. The narrative of, it's not cool anymore to talk about the basket of deplorables, but I don't feel that they've quite gotten the message. What was that like in your family specifically?
Well, I mean, it depends on which part of my family you're talking about. For a lot of them, it was religious issue or social issues, abortion, things like that. For a lot of them, it was just this sort of, I guess, broader cultural thing where they didn't feel like the Democrats were the party of the working class anymore. They felt sort of looked down on by the cultural politics of Democrats. And it just became, untenable. There's no reason for them to vote for Democrats anymore. But I mean, this happened very late. I think the last, where I grew up, our last Republican or our last Democratic representative got ousted in 2010 or something. Mm-hmm. So it was this Obama era thing where you still, before that you still had a lot of Democrats in the South they were called yellow dog Democrats because they would vote for a yellow dog over a Republican. And, that was just how people thought about things. There's still a lot of nostalgia over FDR, over a lot of LBJ's policy, the Rural Electrification Act actually brought my grandma didn't have electricity until the 1970s. It's because of things like the Rural Electrification Act. And so, as the Democratic Party got away from that sort of economic populism and embraced, social positions that I think maybe some people would have put up with if they'd still maintained, that sort of economic populism, there was just no reason once you give up both of those things. So.
Yeah, I think the tragedy of this election is that it's not about the issues, of course. And on these issues, the Democrats are not popular, a lot of issues. And you brought up gender ideology in the schools. This is wildly unpopular across the spectrum with parents. Parents do not want these laws that, Tim Walz signed into law in Minnesota, making Minnesota a sanctuary state for children who decide they're LGBTQ and want to be liberated from their parents, making it much easier for them to do that. We have the same statute in my state, California. These are wildly unpopular policies. So if this election were about the policies, you would have seen a lot of these working class people vote Republican. And that's where they are. It's where, frankly, a lot of moderate Democrats are.
Well, Abigail, briefly, what do you think? What do you think is getting in the way of the election being about the issues?
We have we have very disciplined Democrats who are keeping it away from the issues, and very undisciplined Republicans who can't seem to get back to the issues. Mm-hmm. So it's a disaster in a sense. And the media, of course, is trying to keep it away from the issues. They're so busy fangirling Kamala that they won't push her on really key issues like boys and girls sports. You're talking about something where girls end up injured All their trophies are taken, their records are taken. They've come to bodily harm, and they're terrified in their dressing rooms. This is wildly unpopular. This is a policy of the Biden administration that, and as a result of his executive order, her feet should be held to the fire on this, but no one's willing to do it in the corporate media. And unfortunately, the Republicans aren't doing a good job of holding her feet to the fire either.
Yeah, I mean, it is a final point on this, as I've pointed this out before, is that, go back to Bernie Sanders' record on immigration. He was very hawkish on immigration. It was a policy that he considered a working class policy. Don't have working class jobs being undercut by undocumented, illegal, whatever you want to say, migrants. He backed off on that. The Democrats seem like they're getting back to it.